So this is one of the best, strongest, fastest leveling upheaval build for the Barbarian in Season 2. With this build, you can easily destroy huge groups of enemies and bosses. This build is so strong and you don't need any specific gear for this build to work. This build is also very fun and easy to use. So let's check this out. Okay, so first I'm going to show you clearing this dungeon. And as you can see, the enemies are about 20 levels higher than myself. This build is really strong for AoE damage and can also destroy bosses. Now you don't need any specific gear for this build to work, because when leveling, you will be always switching up your gear for better gear. Now the idea of this build is to use Steel Grasp and your Vampiric Power Hemomancy to clear most of the enemies on the screen, and then finish the rest of the enemies, if any, with your skill Upheaval. This build is also really fun because you can use Steel Grasp to see how many enemies you can pull and then smash them all with Upheaval. Now be aware that this is a leveling build, so once you reach World Tier 4 and start getting ancestral level gear, so around level 60 to 70, then that's when you want to start to transition to endgame builds. But before then, this build will be one of the best, fastest, and easiest build to level. Okay, so next let's check out the skills. Now the basic skill I'm using is Lunging Strike, and this will help you generate fury. The next skill I'm using is Upheaval, and this is our main damage dealing skill. This skill will destroy huge groups of enemies and bosses. The next skill I'm using is Rallying Cry, and this skill will increase your movement speed and resource regeneration. The next skill I'm using is War Cry, and this skill will increase your damage and grant you berserking. And the next skill I'm using is an ultimate skill, Wrath of the Berserker, and this skill will grant you berserking and unstoppable. And the last skill I'm using is Steel Grasp, and this skill will clear out huge groups of enemies, especially if you pair it with your Vampiric Power Hemomancy. So with Hemomancy and Steel Grasp, you should one-shot normal enemies in the area. And with Steel Grasp, you can pull all the enemies to you and then destroy them with your core skill Upheaval. And this skill also grants you berserking and applies vulnerable to enemies. Next, for the weapon expertise, I'm using the two-handed axe expertise for the increased damage and increased critical strike chance against vulnerable enemies. And one trick you can do to quickly level up your weapon expertise is to use the training dummy. The training dummy will give you experience for your weapon expertise every time you hit it. The thing is that the experience gain to your weapon expertise is determined on how much damage you do to a target. So I would recommend to max out your weapon expertise in World Tier 3 or World Tier 4, because you will get stronger weapons, and with stronger weapons, you will quickly level up all your weapon expertise. Okay, so next let's check out the Vampiric Powers. Now, because you're leveling, you're always going to be switching out your gear. So you're not going to have all your Vampiric Powers active. But one Vampiric Power I recommend to always activate is Hemomancy. This skill will destroy all the normal enemies around you, especially using this Vampiric Power with Steel Grasp, which will damage enemies in the area. So with this Vampiric Power, you will level up very quickly. Okay, so next let's check out the skills. So starting with the basic skills, I put 1 point into Lunging Strike, a point into Enhanced Lunging Strike, and a point into Combat Lunging Strike. And this is one of the best basic skills for leveling. You'll basically dash to your enemies, it will generate fury, and also it has a chance to grant you berserking. Next, for the core skills, I put 5 points into Upheaval, a point into Enhanced Upheaval, and a point into Furious Upheaval. And this is our main damage dealing skill. It will destroy huge groups of enemies and bosses. And this skill also has a chance to stun enemies. And then I put 3 points into Endless Fury, and this will help you generate more fury. Next, for the defensive skills, I put 1 point into Rallying Cry, a point into Enhanced Rallying Cry, and a point into Tactical Rallying Cry. And this skill will increase your movement speed and resource regeneration. And next, I put 3 points into Imposing Presence, and this will greatly increase your maximum life. And increasing your maximum life will increase the damage of your Vampiric Power Hemomancy. Next, for the brawling skills, I put 1 point into War Cry, a point into Enhanced War Cry, and a point into Power War Cry. And this skill will greatly increase your damage and grant you berserking. Next, I put 3 points into Booming Voice, and this will increase the duration of your shout skills effect. Next, I put 3 points into Swiftness, and this will greatly increase your movement speed. Next, for the mastery skills, I put 5 points into Steel Grasp, a point into Enhanced Steel Grasp, and a point into Fighter Steel Grasp. And this skill is really good for clearing huge groups of enemies. This skill will also pull all the enemies to you, so it's really easy to aim your core skill Upheaval and destroy huge groups of enemies. And this skill will also apply vulnerable to the enemies and grant you berserking. Next, I put 3 points into Pit Fighter, 3 points into Slaying Strike, and 3 points into No Mercy. And these skills will greatly increase our damage. And for No Mercy, we're getting the stun effect from Upheaval. Next, I put 3 points into Thick Skin and a point into Defensive Stance. And these skills will greatly increase your survivability. And next, I put 3 points into Counter Offensive. And this will greatly increase your damage when you fortify for over 50% of your maximum life. Now, next, for the ultimate skill, I put 1 point into Wrath of the Berserker, a point into Prime Wrath of the Berserker, and a point into Supreme Wrath of the Berserker. Berserker. And this skill will grant you Berserking and Unstoppable. And next I put 3 points into Heavy Handed. And this will greatly increase your critical strike damage. And last but not least, for the key passive, I put a point into Unconstrained. And this will increase your Berserking's duration and increase its damage bonus. Okay, so this is one of the best skill tree layouts for the Upheaval build when leveling. But once you reach World Tier 4 and get Ancestral level gear to start building endgame builds, you do want to adjust your skill tree layout to complement your endgame build. Okay, so next let's check out the gear. Now I do want to mention that this build is so strong that you don't need any specific gear for this build to work. But having some legendary aspects can make this build better. So when it comes to the gear, just pick the gear with the higher item power level. Because when leveling, having high armor and high damage will be the most important stat. So you're going to be always switching up your gear. But once you reach World Tier 4 and start getting Ancestral level gear, that's when you want to focus more on your gear and the stats you're getting. Because at that time, you're going to start building your end game build. So when leveling, just wear the gear with the higher item power level until you start getting Ancestral level gear. But there's always one stat that I always get on my boots and my amulet. And the one stat is movement speed. Having high movement speed will make the leveling process a lot faster. And there are 2 legendary aspects that you can put on your ring for one of the easiest ways to generate your resource. And these legendary aspects can be found on the Codex of Power. So the first legendary aspect I recommend to use on your ring is the aspect of Unrelenting Fury. And this will regenerate your fury when you hit a boss or kill an enemy with a core skill. The second legendary aspect I recommend to use is the aspect of Berserk Fury. And you'll gain 3 fury per second while berserking. And with this build, you're going to be berserking almost all the time. So these 2 legendary aspects should help you with your resource generation. Another legendary aspect that you can use to help leveling faster is using the aspect of Slaughter. This legendary aspect will greatly increase your movement speed, making you clear areas a lot faster. And this legendary aspect is also on the Codex of Power. Now you don't need any specific gear for this build to work, but I'll have a D4 build planner in the description below if you want to know the best stats and legendary aspects to make this build stronger. Okay, so next let's check out the Paragon board. And I do want to mention that since I'm still leveling, this Paragon board is not fully complete. And since I'm not leveling up my glyphs, I did focus more on getting the legendary nodes. And I am building an endgame overpowered build. So starting with the starter board, I did take the exploit glyph, and this will make enemies vulnerable when you damage them. The next Paragon board I took is Bone Breaker, and the glyph I took is Crusher, and this will greatly increase your overpowered damage. I also took the legendary node Bone Breaker, and this will make your skill overpower every 12 seconds. Then I headed this way. And the next Paragon board I took is Decimator. And I did take the legendary node, which greatly increases your vulnerable and overpowered damage. Okay, so that's pretty much the Paragon board setup as of right now. But I'll have a fully optimized Paragon board once I reach level 100. Okay, so thanks for checking out one of the best, strongest, fastest leveling upheaval build for the Barbarian in Season 2. With this build, you should have no problems leveling up very quickly without the need of any specific gears. And I will have a D4 build planner in the description below if you want to check out the full leveling build. But I'll have an updated endgame build once I reach level 100, so stay tuned. Hope this helps and more Diablo 4 videos to come. And of course,